Hello, and how's it going? Um, Today we're going to learn about two great main topics, which is going to be about repopulation and the choice workouts. And these two things I've kind of decided are the most important things that have to do with lyricism, choice of words, and basically is the only reason to do it. And so, based on this, um, we're going to basically say that um, that it is healthier to find yourself out of a group of people in a demographic like statistics. You know, they say, 1 in 100 people are like this, 1 in 1,000 are like this, and then you have things that have to do with you in those demographics and statistics. And things point to things, and there's always signs pointing to the next person, that has something. Usually there's a circle of people, and this one has this, and then that one, can point to the next one, and that one has that, and this one has this. It's like one person gets something from the other person, this person gets it from that person, and has this other stuff that goes to that person, and it goes all the way in a circle. Is how usually it works. And there has to be a difference in the people. But basically, what the job is looking at a demographic. Like, let's say there's 5 people. This is pretty easy to observe. It's like when you're in a workplace, or you're in a room, or you hang out with a group of people. Sometimes there's 3 people, sometimes there's 5 people. And it's a very small demographic, it's really small, but there's a difference between you and each one of these people, is 1/5 of that demographic. And basically what the point of that is to figure out, the difference, between each person in those demographics. And then when you apply it to these bigger demographics, is that they'll still retain the same thing. And when you go out from, 1 out of 100,000, you can make it to 1 out of 100, and, with no problem, and be able to make it from, all the different demographics where you can repopulate something. Like if somebody, if someone, has a memory, it has to be of the things that it was about. And the point of this is to preserve the memories that that person had and look at the resources that they gained. Sometimes people have fun in certain areas and they have memories of that fun and those times and those people. And it's like the point of that repopulation is to be able to understand how, how someone can get killed, or someone can die. We all die, and, every second someone's dying, and every second someone's being born. And because of that, every second there's somebody trying to realign these and try to get them in the right spots. And, every second, there's me right here. And I remember, 26 years ago, when I was born, and I remember what it was like, and I feel like I came from somewhere to get to there, and I feel like that's the only way I could have gotten there. And I think it was because it was people that, like it has been for thousands of years, it's people that have made music, people who have orchestrated, stories, storytelling, groups of people talk and go to places. There's news, there's media, there's reasons things happen, there's accidents, but guess what? Every time there's an accident, there's someone who wanted an accident, and it was that accident that they wanted. They needed that accident, Those types of things all have to do with the repopulation of who we are. And we never want to actually lose something that we've had. And we don't want to gain something that wasn't ours, in our memories, in our hearts, in our minds, in our souls, in our collectives, and out of demographics. And I might be me out of 1 out of 10 people, and it could look different, but I'd still have to fit the demographics. 1 out of 100, 1 out of 1,000. And usually what I focus on, is like let's say classrooms. Classrooms, are populated with a lot of people, but it's usually about 30. In a classroom. And then you have also the grade. There's 30 and, 5 or 6 other classrooms or 10 other classrooms or whatever it is, 300, 500, 1,000. in each one of these layers, and you kind of study, how those people were put together in the demographic, and you can study your school as a reference point in other schools, such as your siblings or your children or, your parents if they went to school, and you can just kind of look at the stories they might have told, and map together what it was like for them and what it was like for you, and then figure out, how you met them in that demographic, how they met you in that demographic, and how you could replenish yourself in that demographic, and I just mean, when it's needed, like if there, is, like one out of 100 people to be you is a very, like, thin reason to need you. So it probably is not very strong as a demographic, as it would be, 1 out of 10,000 or 1 out of 100,000 when you really need you. And the reason to do this is there needs to be 2 people to talk. There needs to be, one person from this demographic that's part of any of these, like 1 out of 5. There needs to be one of those. Every person has to have this. It needs to be even all the way through. There's 1 out of 5 here, right? And there's a person in this isolated demographic, and he's looking for himself, or she is looking out for herself, and there's 5 people in it, right? And there's 2 in this one. There'd be 2 people. One would be one would be the other, and then there's the 1 demographic. But then there's the 1 out of 10. But if there was 3 or 4 1 out of 5 demographics, all of those ones would have to try to meet up and find each other. And they might be dispersed in like different areas, but it would still have this math here. And then, to find yourself the most, you'd have to go out to the biggest demographic, and it should have the most effort to find the other one, who would be the 1 out of 100,000 graphic. Because there would have to be a way to find that person out of that 1 out of 100,000 demographic. And, even though there's 7.3 billion people, there has to be some form of, like, when it rains, not all the water in the entire world, didn't collect somewhere. I mean, let's just say, it didn't just fall into the grass and it didn't have anything to fall on and then just capture some in a puddle. What we're looking at is kind of like the rainforest, kind of like, fields, kind of like when people, have rain collection devices. We're kind of looking at it like that in the demographic. It's like saying, we like, it took this much of hanging out with this type of person, and it's like able to group, from like, there's 20,000 people over here, and I can say, this group over here is going to be kind of like mine, so I can take that person, and then I can go to this group over here, and I can see that one, and this group over here, and see that one, and that one. I can say, I hung out with these types of people here to get to the ones that I knew before that, and that way the memory will be retained. And then I can draw myself from that source of power, is how those people were and what they're still working on, that had to do with me, that had to do with me in the past, like before here, before coming to here, before the birth and after it, like there's still a stream of continuation, and then, it's like, because, you have to, in order to paint a picture, for example, you have to have, a palette that has, the red, yellow, and blue, and all the other colors, white, it can be dash of this, dash of that, and you got to be able to take, the little tiny little pieces, from each one, and just be able to, use those little pieces. And once you can like signify that, by looking at these percentages, and 1 out of 1,000, was a pretty good difference, and I mean, like, if everyone has their own little thing, like, certain things taste different. There's different types of spices, there's different types of sweeteners, there's different types of sugars, there's different types of acid concentrations, bases concentrations, and people have certain features that they fit. And there is always a mold that you can build out of a double negative. Like, for example, okay, a double negative is, or just a negative, is, like, let's say, I'm in this spot here, and then I say that I am not in that spot and I'm in everything but that spot, then there's still a negative of me in that, kind of like a ghost. And it would have to be filled in as an area in thought, it's like kind of what, well, it's not really what I mean. What I mean really is like, okay, if I'm going to go to this spot and this is where my habitual ring is, it's like where I'm projected to go. It's like based on, like, let's see, it's like 1 out of 5 people, this guy, always goes, and does this route, it's like a job, and then it's like, this one remembers this and, has this and does that, and came from over there where he was doing this and that and is going to where he's doing more of what he was doing, and then you say that he's predicted to come here, and then at the habitual ring is where you were predicted to go to that one spot, and then that once you have acknowledged that, that you can say, what, I know where this dude me is going to go, because I'm going to call this out right here. And when you do that lyrically, you're basically saying that in pathfinding, that when you say a word, that you can predict and something that you can understand, is that you can dilly-dally all the way around it. You can go all the way around what you were about to go to, and then you can say, what, I know exactly where I'm going to go. I'm going to go right to this right here, like directly spot, or directly on this point right here at this spot, is where, I would be able to, pinpoint what I'm doing. And being able to do that, it should be able to recreate where you are, because, when you create a double negative or a negative, or you go do every other thing that you could do, and then, it leaves space for what you could do. It's like it gives room for that, so it's like there's, a 1 in 5 demographic and you're filling in the 4 in 5 demographic for yourself, and that way, once you're ready, that 1 in 5 demographic is going to be you, And it's like if you can be every other person, then you should have the ability to also be yourself and want to more. Because, there's difficulties, and when you play, like a video game or something, or, learning maybe, but really a game, there's a difficulty level. And, something that is hard for someone can be easy for someone else. And also something easy for someone else can be hard for someone else as well. But the thing is that both of those are easily interchangeable, and you could easily make it where something is easy that's hard and something hard that's easy, that you've done, even if you've done it for the rest of your whole life or, whatever. And you've always done that exact same thing. Now you can learn how to even that out and, basically be able to change that. And in being able to do that, you should be able to, gain more memory on how that works. And then you'll find what they call like a romantic place for it to be, like for example, it might be intermediate for some people, but it looks good, and it can be like placed in certain areas. Like, how it's kind of like there's mountains and hills in some places, and some places it looks like there should be like trees there, and but somebody else could say, I have a company and I can just go over here and purchase this land and then level it out and do this with it. Or someone else could say scenically, this looks better this way, so I'll make it easy here and hard over there, or difficult here and even more difficult there, and just change it, easy, easier, whatever the difficulties are, is basically what I'm trying to explain. And that it's scenic, really, in that you were there, and it's also decoration that you were there. So I think it's pretty easy, to learn how to be, decoration. Scenically, difficulty and easy. Once you learn how that works, then you can actually easy it down, to where what was, difficult for you is much easier. Once you can play every single position of every single person, by looking at these demographics and seeing how they fit in compared to you, then you should be able to replicate that. And then you could see how, since I don't want to be those 9 other people out of this 10 or out of this 100 or out of this 5, or out of this 1,000, then I can realize that if I tried as hard as I could to be those other 999 people and 99,999 and 999,999 people, and 9,999,999 people, that me wanting to be them as hard as I possibly can and trying as hard as I can, I'll realize that, I probably do want to be those people. And I'll also realize, though, is that in the end, I'd have to want to be me in order to be an individual. So I'd have to be able to try as hard as I can to be them, and it'd be difficult for me or easy or whatever, so I can see if I can be me again, So you can, but you have to figure out that demographic and how to make a difference between those people, so you don't really want to look at it as like an all one, we're all together type of crap where, you don't accept who people are. And then it all goes down to retarded people in demographics, because there's people like this that look like they're doing something else, and they really are, they're not just sitting there like this and, and they had some kind of devil deal, where they had some sex contract with someone in a past life and now they're stuck like this, because that's what they feel guilty about, because people have to accept them for being ugly, is how people are, actually no. What this is making, what music is for, what poetry is for, what better speaking's for, what, like putting an art into what you do is saying, there's more than just one person or two, there is much more than that. And if there's someone retarded, it still has to break down into more demographics, and it can't just be that person's all by themselves and, really cool, they have to be able to blend in, they have to go, back up into here. You can't just have somebody who's sticking out when there's 1 out of 100, and it's just like, doesn't look like it makes any sense. So realizing, how the circle works and how, it's like a recycle circle. It's like my trash goes to the next person. And then, they're like, oh, yep, this is all I needed. And then this will go to the next person. It goes all the way in the circle. And, one person will ask them for directions. Yep, what do I need? And then I was like, whatever I need, goes to the next person, goes all the way around, when someone's asking, like, how do I get to like the next place? And they're like, oh, well, that's easy, man. Just ask this next person, I got you, and we'll get it all the way around. And then it comes back to that person. It should be you, and that's what that's for. So be able to speak to those demographics, look at it like this is a room or a workplace or something like that, and then 100, and then kind of put yourself in those situations and make it to where, people can easily navigate up and down and left and right through it, just like, like a omnipotent, person can, so we can see how we can fit into those demographics and, kind of study how, how birth is, how people are, how people emerge from places, how people go into places, how people can fit into those demographics. And when someone's dead, they shouldn't just disappear and be out of the game. It should be, to where everything that they had somewhere to go to, and like still, someone still got that person's hand, that fell off of that cliff, and, you kept them, and then, you fulfill those wishes for that person, and then that way it goes all the way around the circle, and, it gets passed back around so that person doesn't, disappear. And the only reason that you'd want to die or disappear is because that there's, a sense of unity, when you think that, there's a group of people that are you, then it's okay for you to be dead because there's other people that could fill in your place, and that's not a good way to think, even though there's probably groups of people in those demographics when you go as far as you can out that has to be you and would want to, like a small group, like 10 people, or maybe 100 or 1,000 out of the whole world populace, or maybe even 10,000, or, I wouldn't really go any further than 100, really. That is exactly you, and, but there's got to be some kind of threshold that you could feel out to where you would really know, if that was or not. And, it's probably not, because it's only the year, 2017, so you'd have to be able to work out those groups of people until it makes it to an original person, but it'd have to come from a group of people, to work its way down to where you're at in your memories and where you're from at. It should be based already on a basic standard demographic. I think that's how everyone's memories are based, is all based on a demographic and based on, what's easily predictable. It's like, like the people I hung out with, there's TV shows on TV that helps you, kind of say, we've watched this show, so we either acted like we were in that show or we didn't. There's always a yes and there's a no. And you could say, because those shows, project everything, and you can either say, I liked that show or I didn't. You can say I was part of that show or I wasn't part of that show, and then you can say, I wasn't all this stuff, and then that, solidifies that, and then you can have I did do all this stuff, and that it shows the contrast of the two, so you can say, that there is 1, 2 people, and you're saying, yeah, I'm not this one, but I am this one, because that's what's required for me, to be there. So once you do that, you can be comfortable that there's a lot of people around. And because you don't want to just not have any control of that, not know how, that you came into function, and, that's what it's about. And then, I already explained this part by now, but choice workouts is basically like, you have a habit, and, you always will do something, and then it's like, like you always sit in stools, so you always just, sit in the stool. And then you're someone who sits in a stool. But it's like before you can say that you sit in the stool, you could always do something else. Like once that is able to be sensed by another person, it is already in the rotation. So once you can already sit in this stool, then you are the one who sits in this stool. You're like, yeah, there's someone who sits in a stool, that means you're already into fruition. That means you don't have to do any more than that. When you do, your art forms, when you do your laying out, when you do your styles, this is already done. So once someone can predict that and they can do something else that triggers this again, you can say, well, y'all always goes right back to this thing. Make it annoying and make it bother you and make it just real picky at you when you go back to a spot, that is only saying that only. That just says, I only go to this spot and, that's it. And then once it bothers you enough, then... if it bothers you, then you will know how it hits you. When you go back to the seat and it feels like you're going back to that same seat and someone knows it, then you can do something else. And you can say, you can even do the exact same thing and go to the seat instead of go to that seat. But there has to be a difference between you doing the exact same thing you did and doing it again the exact same way. You have to have a difference each time you sit down in that chair, and then, it's a chair, it was a stool, now it's a stool, and then you could say it's the third stool. You could say it's another chair, but you have to be able to exercise and work it out at a longer distance, or do something in order to kind of mark each time that you do something and it layers into the habit. So you can do something else besides that once that it's in place. And they're like, well, if this is a spawn point for people like this dude, he's probably going to go back to this. Now you can do something else with it. You can do something else with something else. So that's basically how that works. And then being able to predict that path and talk to that person that is sitting in that stool when they sit down. And you can say, yeah, I know you're going to that stool, is what the